Parshas Vayeitzei, Tavshin Ayin Daled. This is one of those parshas, if you look through the parsha, you don't know where to begin. There's so much to talk about in this week's parsha. From the beginning of the parsha, which we actually discussed in the past, the inyan of Yaakov Avinu going to sleep for the first time in a long time, the inyan of the ladder, Roshei Magia Shemaima, we discussed all of that. Further in the parsha, Yaakov working for Lavan. Now Lavan is just everybody's favorite. You try to figure out Lavan in the parsha. Yaakov gets married first to Leah, then to Rachel, then to Zilpah and Bilhah. The Shvatim begin to be born. But all these things that happened to Yaakov Avinu are a result of the brachas that were given to Yaakov, and before Yaakov, brachas were given to Yitzchak, and before that, to Avraham Avinu. Now, when we read these brachas in the Torah, we read them, we say, oh, very nice things. They were promised to be kekochvei hashamayim l'roiv, that they'll be like the stars, or they'll be like chol, they'll be like sand, they'll be like afar haaretz. We say, oh, each one of these is a very, very nice bracha. But the Nesivos Shalom, as we know, doesn't take things ever at face value. If it says in one place, kechochvei hashamayim, and another place, kachol asher al svas hayom, and in another place, like afar haaretz, it means something. The pasuk at the beginning of this week's parsha, Parshas Vayeitzei, v'hoyo zaracho ka'afar haaretz, that your children will be like afar haaretz, ufarat toyoma v'kedma v'tzafoyna v'negba, and they'll spread out in every which direction. They'll be west, east, north, south, and then v'nivruchu b'cha kol mishpachoyso adamu. And this is the bracha that was given to Yaakov Avinu at the beginning of this week's parsha. And we see that each of the avos received their own individual bracha. Like we said, Avraham Avinu was blessed with what? Kechochvei hashamayim. And Chachol asher al svas hayom. Avraham Avinu got those. Yitzchak Avinu had a different bracha. Yitzchak Avinu got v'hir be'isiyah zaracho kechochvei hashamayim. Just that. And Yaakov Avinu was told at the beginning of this week's parsha, v'hoya zaracha ka'afar haaretz. The Nesivos Shalom gives a different explanation for each one of these brachas. He says like this: Kochvei hashamayim, stars. What's the bracha of Kochvei hashamayim? What does a star in the shamayim represent? What does it mean to us? Kochvei hashamayim, says in Nesivos Shalom, they represent yichidim, individuals who are Oved Hashem on a very, very high level. Stars are in a very high place. These refer to people who are Zoiche, and they're able to be Oved HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a very high level. However, what is the characteristic of a star? Something very interesting, says in Nesivos Shalom. A star, it may be very high, and it may be very bright, but one star has no connection to the other star. Each one shines on its own. That's a characteristic of a star. And that's what that bracha is referring to. That people who individually, they're very high, but yet they have no shaykhis. If they have the capability, they shine on their own. But they don't have anything to do with the other ones. Choil asher al svas hayom. Sand, which is on the beach, sand is totally different than that. Sand has the ability, we know, and we get to see this. If you go down to the ocean, you see the sand is able to refrain the waters from flooding the dry land. It's able to stop the waves of water which come from the ocean from overrunning all the land. But yet, if you take a look, each granule of sand, each one considered alone is nothing. It's just about insignificant. The only mila of Choil asher al svas hayom is that they stick together with the others, and one doesn't become part of the other. They don't actually just stick together. What it is the sand, they line up one against the other, and together they're able to do a job. Together they're able to keep the water out of the dry land, and by doing so they protect the land. And this concept, says in Nesivos Shalom, is a different aspect and something which should apply and does apply, hopefully, many times to Klal Yisrael. That Klal Yisrael takes on its capabilities. Klal Yisrael is able to do what it has to do. What? When we are banded together. And when we're banded together, we're able to shield, just like the water, we're able to shield the outside influences from overrunning Klal Yisrael. Alone, each and every one of us is like a granule of sand. We're just that one individual thing. But when we get together, then we have amazing capability. We're able to do something ba'achdus like Klal Yisrael. The bracha, the third thing that we wanted to mention, the afar ha'aretz, the bracha that was given to Yaakov Avinu in this week's parsha, has something extra. The extra thing is that when it sticks together, afar ha'aretz, when it sticks together, it's not just lined up one next to the other. Afar ha'aretz becomes one. Even a higher madrega. It's not an individual thing anymore. We get together and we become like one. So sand has what we would call achdus, but it doesn't have dveikus. Afar ha'aretz has dveikus. It becomes one. And what happens when afar ha'aretz becomes one? A very miraculous thing happens. When afar ha'aretz becomes one, it develops and gets a koyach hatzmicha. When earth becomes one, not only does it stick together, achdus and dveikus, everything together, but there's a koyach hatzmicha. Now we have the ability to produce, the ability to grow. So while stars and the sand have tremendous milas, but they cannot produce anything further. There is no growth. It doesn't go weiter. It doesn't do anything further. And the entire Bria, as we know, survives on the koyach hatzmicha of afar ha'aretz. Sticking together, becoming one, that produces growth. And the entire Bria relies on that. Why? Because it sticks together. And what an unbelievable lesson to internalize. What an unbelievable lesson for us to think about sometimes. That no matter how good we are, and no matter how much we could do as individuals, and no matter how much we could do when we get together sometimes, but when we become one unit, when we become Klal Yisrael, when there's achdus, when people are not knocking each other, when people are being ba'achdus as one, and they have one matara in mind, and they get together to do it, we're able and we're capable to do so much more. And that's what Klal Yisrael is all about. In next week's parsha, when Yaakov Avinu was preparing for a confrontation with his wonderful brother Esav, Yaakov Avinu said as follows: Ki yorei anachi Esai, I am afraid of Esav. Pen yavoi v'hikani aim al banim, that Esav's going to come and he's going to overrun our entire machaneh. He's going to smite everybody, mothers, children. Esav was going to have no mercy. And what did Yaakov Avinu say after that? Ve'ata marta. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you said, Heitev heitiv imach, v'samtia zaracha kechoil hayom. That you're going to make my children, you're going to make our children like the chol, the sand, that's at the water. Now think about it a second. Yaakov Avinu was not given that bracha. He asked for something. Yaakov Avinu could have gotten the bracha of the stars, afar ha'aretz. Those were actually promised to Yaakov Avinu. And at that moment, what did Yaakov Avinu ask for? He said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you promised that you were going to make your children like what? Kechol hayom. What's the reason? It's beautiful. It's like we just said. Because at that moment, when Esav was going to come in waves and wipe out men, women, children, Esav was going to come and wipe everybody out, Yaakov Avinu was referring to the bracha given to his ancestor. This is what I need now. We need the bracha of achdus where we're going to be together and we're going to be able to hold back Esav. Esav was coming in waves and he wanted to wipe everything out. But when we get Ba'achdus, Yaakov Avinu was telling us, Klal Yisrael, that that's the way to protect yourself, by being together. The Nesivos Shalom explains these three madregas al pi derech avoda also. He says, Koich ve'ashamayim represents, like we said, those who are Oved Hashem on a high level. But what does it mean that they're Oved on a high level? They see and they understand the godless Hashem. Their Ikar Avodah is Asay Toiv. They're able to do things on their own. They're always able to do mitzvahs. That's how they stay connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Koich ve'ashamayim. Choyel asher al S.S.S. hayom, says in Nesivos Shalom, is those who are not on as such a high madrega as that. How are they Oved Hashem? The Oved Hashem by Sur Meirah. Let me at least protect myself. Let me at least not do anything against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They use the Achdus of Klal Yisrael. They stick together to stay very strong, and that helps the person fight the Yetzer Hara of Taivas. That's the next madrega. They're able to do that. And the last madrega, says the Nesivos Shalom, is the madrega of Afar Haaretz, and that's represented in this week's parsha. And that is the koyach of Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu comes from a lashon of Ekev, a madrega of shiflus, of feeling low, that you're not great, that you're not something extraordinary. You don't think much of yourself. And Nesivos Shalom speaks, he says, there was a difference of opinion between the two brothers, Rebbe Elimelech and Reb Zusha. They had this argument, I don't want to say argument, they had this difference of opinion of how a person should approach Avodas Hashem. Should he begin his Avodas Hashem with godless Haboirei, always saying how great HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're so great? Or should a person begin his Avodas Hashem with Shiflus Atzmoi, to say, I'm nothing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will get to after, but a person should start with Shiflus Atzmoi. And they had this ongoing difference of opinion. So they went to ask their Rebbe, the Maggid. And he had the following answer. He said, Elu ve'elu divrei elikim chayim. They're both excellent and very, very good ways to do Avodas Hashem. However, the Maggid said, you should really start, a person should start from Shiflus Atzmoi. And listen to this unbelievable thing that he said. Why should a person start? You have a choice. Both ways are good. Gadlus Haboirei, Shiflus Atzmoi, two ways to conduct yourself. But he said that a person should start from Shiflus Atzmoi. Why? Because from the ground, you have nowhere to fall. A person should start from Shiflus Atzmoi, because once you're down there, you can't fall. And that's the goddess of the bracha given to Yaakov Avinu in this week's parsha. V'hoya zaracho ka'afar ha'oretz. Zok the Nesivos Shalom. That we should understand Shiflus Atzmoi, of what we really are. A person who's born into this world, try to do the best that you can in this world, and then passes on to the next world. Shiflus Atzmoi. And a person, when you do that, you can withstand any matzav. You don't feel much of yourself. And that's the bracha given to Yaakov Avinu. And the Nesivos Shalom says, encompassed in this bracha is ka'afar ha'aretz. Understand Shiflus Atzmoi, that your children should never fall. They should be like Afar Haaretz, because once you're down there and you're doing and you're an Anav and you have the right attitude about life, then you're taken care of. You can't fall. You cannot fall too far from being low. And that's the shoirish of Ekev. That is Yaakov Avinu. Ekev, which teaches us about being an Anav. Yaakov Avinu was called the Bechira Avos because he took all the lessons from Avraham and Yitzchak and brought it all home, brought it all out in his way of Avodas Hashem. Let's remember these lessons from the Avos. There's so much to learn. Long Friday night this week, the first Friday night, let's sit down, learn from the Avos, learn the Parsha. We should be zoicha to emulate the Avos.